Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Alyssa Grzesh, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists. On behalf of the AAJLJ, thank you all for joining us for today's very important program, Combating Holocaust Denial and Distortion Across Borders, a conversation with the founders of Shoah Truths. At a time when Holocaust denial and distortion are becoming increasingly sophisticated and widespread, lawyers have an important role to play in defending historical truths, supporting victims and their families, and of course, ensuring that legal systems are used to combat distortion and hatred rather than enable it. We are honored to be joined today by the founders of Shoah Truths, an organization established to confront Holocaust denial and distortion through legal advocacy, education, historical memory preservation, and community engagement. Their work grew out of efforts to respond to Holocaust distortion surrounding the 1941 Jedwabne massacre in Poland, and has since expanded to support Holocaust victims' descendants and promote historical truth around the world. Today's conversation will explore the legal, historical, and practical challenges of combating Holocaust denial, the work Shoah Truths is doing internationally, and how members of the legal community can help preserve the historical record for future generations. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Jonah Brafman and Abe Waserstein. Thank you both for being with us today, and thank you for the very important work you're doing. We look forward to the discussion.
Alyssa, thank you. And thank you for everyone who's joining. Good afternoon and also good evening to some. I know we have people in Europe joining, so thank you for making the time to do that. Before I get started, I just want to take a moment to recognize the fact that Alyssa, Joan, and I are kind of this next generation of people who are going to confront Holocaust denial. And I think for Shoah Truths, a big part of our focus is figuring out what is the role of young professionals, Gen Z, in doing this work. So thank you all for joining. I encourage you all to engage in the Q&A. We will answer questions at the end. And with that, we will get started. So welcome to our conversation.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jonah Brafman. I'm a co-founder and the legal director at Shoah Truths. I'm excited to tell you about what we do as a brand new nonprofit organization. By way of background, I'm a U.S. attorney licensed in Florida, soon to be admitted in New York, and my background is in commercial litigation. You'll hear about the city of Jedwabne in Poland, which became our first major legal matter and is the model for the work that we'll discuss with you today.
And Jonah did not only pass the New York bar, he actually drove from North Carolina amid the blizzard, got to New York, and crushed the bar. So, Jonah, thank you for that. My name is Abe. I am the chairman of the board of Shoah Truths, and I'm currently a rising 3L at Duke Law. So let me tell you a little bit about our story. After my first year of law school, I received two grants, one from Duke Law and one from the University of Warsaw, to engage in a project looking at anti-Semitism laws. And I focused on Latin America and Europe. So I actually began in Argentina, and I spent a month there looking at the civil and criminal codes in Latin American countries for references to anti-Semitism or Holocaust denial or laws on religious, ethnic, national discrimination, things of that nature. And then I traveled to Poland for 2 weeks. This was through the Prom Scholarship. And while I was in Poland, I went to Jedwabne. And Jedwabne is a town where there was a Polish massacre of the Jewish community. And my grandfather is one of the few survivors who witnessed what unfolded. In fact, in Bialystok in 1945, before the Holocaust officially ended, my grandfather went to a Russian outpost to deliver testimony saying what I saw needs to be accounted for historically. There needs to be a record of what happened here in Yavabne. So I went to Yavabne, and this was in June of last summer. And I walked around actually with a non-Jewish activist who preserves the last few remnants of what remains of Jewish life in Yavabne, which is this memorial site that you see to your right, and then the Jewish cemetery, which I have an image in the middle. And that is it. That is it for this once thriving Jewish community where about half the population was Jewish and the other half was not. And if you'd like to learn more about it, please reach out. And a book I'd recommend is Neighbors by Jan Gross. In it, you will see my grandfather's testimony translated into English, and that formed the basis and foundation for Gross's work. And it started an international conversation about the role of Polish society during the Holocaust, both as victims, as perpetrators, and as righteous Gentiles who helped, right? And that's part of my family story. In Yavabne, my grandfather was saved by someone called Antosha. And this is really something that grappling with this history has been a challenge for Poland for much time. And I want to talk a little bit about what is happening today. So in 2000, Young Gross publishes Neighbors, and it begins this international discussion and this national discussion about what happened in Yavabne. And throughout time, there have been efforts to push against the historical record that has been established by historians, by academics. In the mid 2000s, there were efforts to exhume bodies with this argument to say, well, if the bodies exhibit any bullet wounds, then it wasn't the Poles who committed the murders, it was the Germans. They actually did a partial exhumation and found that the bodies confirmed the records of what was being said, that they were burnt victims, which was how the majority of the killings took place in Yavabne, and there were not bullet wounds. Fast forward to a few weeks after I was in Yavabne, so we're talking last summer, in June of last summer. A couple weeks later, in July, there were these installments of 8 boulders put directly adjacent to the Yavabne memorial that commemorates the Jewish community. And these 8 plaques and boulders would say very anti-Semitic statements, accusing the Jews, for example, of being communist sympathizers who were complicit in the murder of Poles, and things of that nature. And fast forward to a few months ago, in April of 2026, this same group installed a trailer adjacent to the memorial that seeks to distort the history of Yavabne. And in this space, we're going to talk a lot about denial and distortion. And these are both things that go hand in hand. One of the things and sources you could look at, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance has a definition of Holocaust denial, and I'll go through the different types. So here in Yavabne is a situation where you have distortion. It is not directly denying what happened in Yavabne, but it is distorting the facts about what took place. And interestingly, the tax authorities are also conducting investigations into the fundraising activities. So it shows a little bit, and we'll talk more about this, the different types of legal recourse that exist when facing Holocaust denial and distortion, which we tend to call in our work HDD. So here are some of the images. To your left, you will see the boulder installment. And this was, if you remember the few slides back, when I was there, this is right next to that picture where I was. And here's one example of the boulders. And this was saying that accusing many of the Soviet officials of being of Jewish origin, and then saying that this was not committed by the Poles, it was committed by the Germans. This is one of the examples of the distortion of the history of Yavabne that takes place. And here's an image of people coming to visit these boulders, denying and distorting the history of Yavabne. There are large crowds that gather, and this was approximately, different records say, almost upwards of 100 people who were present there a couple of months ago. And you could see there, this is the Denial Museum that's directly adjacent to the boulders, denying what took place, and people are gathering there. And again, a couple of months ago, these pictures were taken.
So after Abe witnessed this in Yadwabne, where his grandfather survived 85 years ago, we spoke, and he mentioned that his family was wondering, well, what can we do about this to fight this and combat this? And so this is the result. This is what we ended up doing. We retained local counsel in Poland and worked with them to file a formal criminal notification with the prosecutor in Łomża, Poland, on behalf of the descendants of survivor Samuel Wasserstein. This included regularly meeting with Polish counsel, comparing criminal, civil, and administrative options, identifying statutes, reviewing the evidence, and distilling it into this legal brief. We helped frame the facts, test the legal theories, and connect the filing to the family's broader strategy. Now, I am not a Polish attorney. I'm a U.S. attorney, and I worked with our Polish counsel on this filing and developed legal theories with their guidance on Polish law. Now, when the family thought what they could do, frankly, I don't think that the Polish prosecutor's office expected the family of one of the survivors of this massacre to appear in court for this recent installation in Jedwabne 84 years after the events. So I think that's really special that we were able to make an appearance. But why did we begin with a criminal notification rather than pursuing a civil lawsuit? Well, first and foremost, it's a much lower initial procedural burden and a lower cost, much more cost effective than launching civil litigation right off the bat. It invoked state investigative powers, having the state preserve evidence, identify the actors who installed the boulders, have the state interview witnesses, and assess charges that can be brought. We worked to get the Wasserstein family injured party status in the criminal proceeding and allow them to achieve access to the case files and have a formal role in the criminal proceeding. And in this way, we were able to turn what would have just been a public controversy into an established legal evidentiary record. It also complemented a criminal investigation that had already been started by Polish authorities. It allowed the family's allegations, evidence, and perspective to enter the official case file. It aligned with the strategy being pursued by other members of the Polish Jewish community, and it preserved civil, administrative, and diplomatic options rather than committing the family to only pursuing one path, like civil litigation. And recognition of injured party status gave the named descendants a formal place in a proceeding that is arising from a massacre that occurred 84 years ago in this place. So our notice of criminal act to the prosecutor had a number of requests in it, stated very explicitly. First, that they open preliminary criminal proceedings into the alleged conduct, that the prosecutors preserve evidence, so they secure physical and digital evidence, including the plaques, boulders, photographs, videos, and relevant online conduct. That includes online posts and crowdfunding materials. They had posted on YouTube the installation of these boulders. That the state worked to identify the authors, organizers, sponsors, landowners, and others involved in this installation, so that we could really move these boulders and plaques that popped up from anonymous propaganda to what can we do about this, to having the state work to identify who is responsible and preserve the evidence of their responsibility. We also asked the state to interview witnesses, event participants, organizers of the event, and people connected to fundraising and promotion of the boulders and plaques, to recognize the survivor families' representatives as participants in the proceeding, to consider building legal memorial protections and other administrative measures. And our strategy was very deliberately multi-track with all these aspects of criminal law, procedural, administrative, and potentially civil action. Our notice then, after the requests, organized the course of conduct of installing these boulders into four distinct legal harms or legal claims. The first three arising under Polish Criminal Code, and the last one under a Polish statute from the Institute of National Remembrance Act in Poland. So Article 256 was the first. That is really focusing on public incitement to hatred, and it primarily relates to the effect that the installation had on the audience who sees the installation. Article 257 is public insult based on a protected identity, and that really relates to dignity of the people targeted, an injury to the targeted group's dignity. Article 261 is insult or desecration of a monument or memorial site, and that's a crime that relates to an injury to a memorial or commemorative space. And under Article 55 of the Institute of National Remembrance Act, we have a public denial of specified established historical crimes. So that can include explicit denial of the Holocaust, or potentially in this case, the Abe Waserstein massacre. And I want to emphasize that according to our Polish attorneys, they, I believe, told us that these theories are novel in the way that we are using them. As far as I know, no one has really tried to appear in court, in criminal court, and use this combination of laws to combat Holocaust denial the way that we are trying to do in our formal filing. So the first crime was under Article 256, Section 1 of the Polish Criminal Code, public incitement to hatred. The elements are public conduct that incites or intensifies hatred, and that hostility is based on national, ethnic, racial, or religious differences. Now, public conduct can include conduct on private land, which happens to be the case here, when that conduct is deliberately visible to an indefinite audience and especially amplified online. They posted it online. Now, our theory was that the plaques and the text on them recast Jews collectively as Soviet collaborators, traitors, and perpetrators against Poles. Now, this crime under Article 256 is not simply about historical error and misstating history. It is about using a historical falsification to reactivate anti-Semitic stereotypes and stir up hostility against a protected group, including a religious group like the Jews. Now, Article 256 is about what the message on the plaques encourages the audience who sees the plaques to feel. It's a harm based on the audience. Article 257 is public insult based on protected identity. So the elements here are a public insult directed at a person or a group because of nationality, ethnicity, race, religion, or lack of religion, and intentional conduct. This differs from Article 256 because we're shifting the focus from the audience's hostility, the effect on the audience, to the dignity of the targeted group. And we can infer intent here from the location, having the boulders right next to the official Yad Waserstein Memorial, the anniversary timing that they were installed the day before the 84th anniversary of the massacre, their permanence, that it's a permanent installation, the fundraising, the planning, and the way they disseminated the installation online. Now, our theory is that this constitutes a deliberate humiliation of the Jewish community, the victims, and their descendants who we represent in the criminal proceeding. So Article 257 asks what the conduct does to the dignity of the people targeted, where 256 asked the effect to sow hatred on the audience. Third was Article 261. That's insulting a monument or memorial site. This crime protects a monument or public place established to commemorate a historical event or a person or honor a person. And this isn't, just simple graffiti or vandalism. Our theory is that this really relates to a symbolic and functional desecration of a commemorative site. And the permanent denial plaques were placed immediately next to the official Yadvanda Memorial and within visitors' visual field. So people who go to see the real memorial will undoubtedly see this new installation. They had also placed candles and wreaths around this new installation to present the denial installation as a competing place of remembrance, which insults the official memorial site. So Article 261 is not about the effect on the audience or the dignity of the targeted group, but about what the installation did to the memorial space itself. And lastly, the Article 55 of the IPN Act is public denial of historical crimes. So the elements here are a public statement that is contrary to established facts, and it is denial of a crime that is covered by the IPN Act. So these plaques on the boulder installation do not deny that the Jews died. They deny the participation of local Polish perpetrators and assign responsibility exclusively to a German unit. Our theory is that in so doing, they attempt to erase an established and essential feature of the crime, or that the attempted erasure of an essential feature of an established crime can itself constitute denial of the historical event. This is our most contested theory. The defense in the criminal proceeding may attempt to call this a different historical interpretation of the events. Our response is that the plaques make categorical claims that are completely contrary to official findings and witness evidence of the actual events. So the criminal matter is pending in the Yadwabna. We are also contemplating civil action with Polish counsel. But Yadwabna showed us that this isn't just one family's case. It exposed a broader international need to families beyond the Waserstein family. So Yadwabna was the catalyst for forming Shoah Truths. At the beginning of this year, we formed and filed. We recently achieved 501c3 status. We are a nonprofit organization. And we saw that descendants of survivors or victims of the Holocaust who are confronting new denial attacks in this new wave of anti-Semitism often need local counsel, strategic coordination, funding, media support, and a network that's really international wherever this is popping up. And so we formed this nonprofit to expand this model in Yadwabna beyond one family and one country. And so we were inspired to build an organization capable of doing this work all over the world.
And to that work, what we really do is we are combating Holocaust denial and distortion through truth and justice initiatives. And our focus is supporting Holocaust victims and their descendants by providing this level of holistic advocacy support. And when we talk about kind of this type of work, it's very interesting to think about kind of the role of young professionals in this. When we talk with organizations, kind of something that stands out a lot is that a lot of young people are saying they're recognizing that Holocaust denial and distortion is a contemporary form of anti-Semitism, does in fact increase violence and discrimination against the Jewish community, and there is a need to address it. So a lot of our work in creating this nonprofit, we had a lot of assistance from different people who said, let's get involved. Let's see how we can be helpful. The Duke Law Community Enterprise Clinic, for example, provided us with pro bono support to help file our 501c3 application with the IRS, which was a huge support. We also received low bono support from a law firm in Miami. So it's to show that this is really a community effort to address these types of issues. And we can talk a little bit more about the problem and kind of how our approach to it is.
So the way we saw it is that we know there are other organizations that exist to combat anti-Semitism, especially some that fight Holocaust denial under that umbrella, but that support organizations often operate in separate silos, and it can be difficult for descendants to locate or access those resources. Denial is increasingly digital, cross-border, fast-moving, and difficult to address through traditional structures alone. We understand that families of survivors or victims may need different kinds of assistance in combating Holocaust denial, including legal help, preserving historical memory, communications, media, community, and diplomatic support all at the same time. And so Shoah Truths aims to be a central point of access, connecting these people and these families to the right local expertise, no matter what the problem is, no matter where it is in the world. And rather than replacing those local experts, we want to connect them with the people in the best position to help them in their given situation.
So what is our approach? We want to be a one-stop shop to support victims of denial attacks, and we want to address these gaps. We want to do so through strategic partnerships with other organizations doing incredible work like 3G and others, and creating those points of connection. Because sometimes, speaking from right now in my experience as a member of the Waserstein family, when we were facing these denial attacks, it was very hard to navigate the system. We didn't know who to go to, who to speak with. And it took a lot of familial and community help to figure out where to go. And Shoah Truths, we want to address that gap. We want to be a point of connection between the victims of denial attacks and the organizations doing work. And where gaps exist that other organizations cannot do because of limitations in resources, we want to be there to provide that assistance. We also want to build a more expansive volunteer base. As an organization that has a young professional leadership with a lot of support from other demographics and age groups as well, we want to be able to say, let's get young people involved in this work because we are the ones, and now it is our time to figure out how to address Holocaust denial in the digital age. And that is really by meeting people where they're at. It is empowering Gen Z leaders to say, it is now our time to step up. It is our time to figure out how to address these growing issues, and it is our time to be creative about how to address it by bringing light to an issue that has a lot of darkness.
And in meeting with other organizations and leaders in the community, a response that we didn't initially expect, but has really emerged as a theme in our organization, is the age of our board members and our volunteers. So 64% of our leadership is in their 20s, and our organization is working to intentionally build the next generation of advocates for historical memory and preserve the truth in what happened 80 years ago. We have 9 professional backgrounds on our board. That includes members of the clergy, doctors, lawyers, educators, programmers, artists, founders, entrepreneurs, and consultants. And this is very much by design because we understand that there are many different prongs and areas to combat Holocaust denial, and that legal problems often overlap with problems related to history, technology, education, media, social media, and community relations. And even though we're relatively young, our young leadership is also working very closely alongside experienced community figures and professional advisors.
And I also want to add, we have a variety of faiths on our board as well. And I think that's something that deepens our work in many meaningful ways. People who realize that hatred against Jewish people in the form of Holocaust denial impacts everyone. It increases violence against communities, and it is something that attacks historical accuracy and the truth. And this idea of the right to truth is something that around the world is something that is recognized, that is understood to be valuable. And the way that Shoah Truths is tackling these issues, today we are speaking a lot about our kind of legal advocacy arm, which is a huge part of what we do. But we also think about ways to engage with the community. How could we directly speak with people who are interested in this topic, who have stories to share? How can we make those stories about what happened 85 years ago relevant today for people? Because while history might not repeat, it certainly does rhyme. And those lessons are the lessons that we can use to build that better future. And we in the present are the custodians of the past. We have a responsibility to protect and preserve memory. And we also do that through education. We want to talk with people. We want to share our story about Yavabne, about the work we do, about other cities that are facing denial attacks. Through education, people will understand that the past has increasingly more importance today in a world where it is hard sometimes to tell fact from lie. And this is why our education prong is so important. And it really goes to digital denial. I think that is the part that is most complex and difficult about combating Holocaust denial, because now it is proliferating so much online to the point where on platforms like Telegram, about 50%, according to UNESCO, of posts deny or distort the Holocaust. And we're talking about figures around 18%, I believe, based on the UNESCO source, talking about posts and content on TikTok that are denying and distorting. These are high figures, and these are on platforms that are frequently used. So this is not something that is kind of a small numerical value, and you'll see more of the statistics as we progress. There are a lot of posts online denying and distorting the Holocaust and Holocaust history.
So on the legal side of the organization, we really see three separate lanes that could be pursued by families experiencing denial attacks. The first is criminal prosecution, connecting families with local counsel, the way we're doing with the Waserstein family in Yadwabne, to review criminal notifications and related filings, and support strategy and evidence development in the criminal proceedings. Under civil litigation, we have contemplated civil actions to do work product review, fundraising for legal costs for families that can't afford it, and conducting comparative law research to assist in the litigation process. And under diplomacy, we want to work to engage with governments and institutions and community stakeholders to support legal and policy responses. And under civil claims, because we know this work is really focused internationally and globally, there's a lot of great organizations doing work domestically in the US. That gives us access to remedies available in the relevant jurisdiction and not just simply importing US law. So we work with local counsel, learn about the laws of that country and that nation state. And for example, in the United States, you may remember from bar prep that defamation is not a valid claim against deceased persons in the US. That's not the case in every European civil law system. That some of them, including Poland, recognize legal protections for the memory and dignity of the deceased, and that comes with rights to the surviving family members. And so that really gave us a civil theory in Poland that we feel confident pursuing with local counsel if we have the funding.
And I'd like to speak a little bit, we started with Yavabne, but that is our pilot, our first inaugural project. And we realized that this is going on in so many other parts of the world. Throughout Europe, there are other cities and parts of Holocaust history that are facing denial attacks. And you also see the proliferation and growth of Holocaust denial and distortion throughout the entire Western Hemisphere. And that's something that at Duke, I've had the opportunity to do some research on and to look into the current status of what's going on with Holocaust denial in the Americas. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that to give you a sense of where else will Shoah Truth be going on its contemplated work. So I like to show this graph. This is a graph I developed for one of my papers, and I wanted to show what are the Jewish populations in Europe and Latin America. And people always find this very striking, right? You have this mix of, and so the blue dots will be Latin American countries, the yellow dots are European countries, and France being kind of a much larger community, about 450,000 Jewish people. But you will see that it is a mix, that Latin America and Europe have comparable sizes of Jewish population, Argentina being a large community, but it's larger than the Jewish community of Germany, Brazil being larger than most of the European countries in terms of Jewish population. So when we think about kind of the addressing Holocaust denial and distortion, we can not only think about Europe, we can not only think about efforts in the United States, we also have to look at areas like Latin America, which based on these figures, we see that there are comparable sizes of Jewish population there, usually a very striking figure for people. So I like to share that one. So we can move on to the next slide there. So present-day anti-Semitism in Latin America is rising. Despite being less than 1% in all of the countries in Latin America, there are widespread increases in Holocaust denial and distortion. Most of it has taken place online. For example, on X and Facebook, it tripled between 2022 to 2024 anti-Semitic incidents, with a total of 2.4 million posts in 2024. And a lot of those posts are engaging in Holocaust denial and distortion. Again, it is this contemporary form of anti-Semitism. And there's a scholar who talks about that the last stage of a genocide is denial of a genocide. So this is really something that is important to address and to recognize as having serious implications for society. And when there is a growth of violence online, that will lead to an increase in violence in the world physically. And that we have seen in Latin America as well. There have been attacks against Jewish people, against Jewish centers, both physically through vandalism and threats against the Jewish community. And then there's the issue of normalization. When there is inaction by the state in response to HDD, it contributes to a climate where it is normalized and where these statements will go with impunity, despite its negative implications for society and dangers. So to give you a few examples, and this, if you're interested in reading more, I encourage you, the State Department has developed human rights reports that discuss some of these issues. And in Brazil, there were 886 anti-Semitic incidences in between January and May of 2024 alone. That is 6 times more than 2023. There are 320 neo-Nazi groups with about 10,000 members operating in just Santa Catarina, just one state of Brazil. The police dismantled a neo-Nazi cell linked to the Hammerskins, which is a neo-Nazi group that actively tries to recruit young people and promote Nazi propaganda. And there are other groups that describe themselves as the new SS of Santa Catarina, and they have engaged in activities involving the manufacturing firearms and distributing Nazi propaganda, which is unlawful under Brazilian law. In Colombia, most recently, you had the former president, Petro, make this heinous statement, and he has engaged countless times in invoking Nazism when responding to his opponents. And there is a need to act, and various Latin American countries have denounced those actions, and the Jewish community has denounced those actions. So these are just some of the examples in Brazil and Colombia, and I'll share a few more now. In Argentina, there were 427 anti-Semitic incidents in 2022 alone. 86% of them, including Holocaust denial, occurred on social media. It happened online. But there are also things outside of social media that occurred. For example, there was a private museum containing Holocaust denial materials, Nazi artifacts, and anti-Semitic publications. There was a bookstore where authorities had to get involved because it printed and sold Holocaust denial and Nazi propaganda. In Mexico, for example, there was a series of raids where there was going to be a concert taking place involving a neo-Nazi band, and authorities had to get involved to stop that, and that had a series of raids involved as well. And you also had images being used of President Scheinbaum with a swastika armband. And these again are issues where your trivialization of the Holocaust in the modern context is something we see a lot of throughout Latin America. So what are some of the laws that exist? This was really interesting, right? Going back to last summer when I was doing my project on anti-Semitism laws in Latin America, a lot of people are always shocked to see that there are references in Latin America to anti-Semitism laws and also specifically to the Holocaust and Holocaust denial. So in Argentine law, there's a broader law that criminalizes participation, engaging, or propaganda on ideas and theories of racial, religious, ethnic, or color-based superiority. And there's an intent requirement that has to justify and promote racial and religious discrimination. So you'll see in a lot of these laws, there is this intent requirement that's common in criminal law, and that is something that the Argentine law displays. And the types of penalties involved could range from fines to imprisonment to other remedies as well that exist. And under Brazilian law, there's actually a law that criminalizes the manufacturing, commercializing, distributing, or disseminating symbols, ornaments, badges, or propaganda containing swastikas for the purpose, again, this intent requirement of promoting Nazism. And in Colombia, there's a law that deals on promoting or justifying genocide or anti-Semitism. And this is a prohibition against the rehabilitation of genocidal or anti-Semitic regimes. And one of the remedies there is the disqualification from public office for such conduct. And while these laws exist, there are very few cases where they've been implemented. So for future research, I think it would be fascinating to engage in work looking at, okay, what are the levels of implementation of these laws in practice?
Yeah, I think it's time that we test the limits of these laws, the enforcement of these laws, and see with local council what we can do in terms of enforcement of these laws.
And in a lot of the work I've looked at, and I'm currently in a JD LLM in international comparative law, so I always like in our work and in our classes, we always think about what do the international law sources say about this, and I encourage everyone to look at some of these sources. Look at the ICCPR or ICESCR or the Convention on the Rights of Child, and think about how rights enshrined within those documents are violated through Holocaust denial and distortion. And this is a great conversation that we could have for another time, but I want to make sure we can address questions, but really to know that this addressing Holocaust denial and distortion takes a lot of different angles when doing this kind of work. For example, in our Notice of Criminal Act, we rely heavily on domestic law, but we also make note of binding international law obligations that the Polish state has under things like the ICCPR and under things like the European Convention on Human Rights. These are important sources that have implications that provide guidance on how to address some of the most pressing issues that our society is facing, and one of those is anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and distortion.
This is where we intend to go. The first next step for us is next week, is the anniversary of the Edwardna massacre that occurred on July 10th in 1941. There will be a memorial ceremony. There is also going to be protesters, a counter ceremony, and Shoah Truth thought it was very important that we send a delegation, including members of the Waserstein family, to be present at the memorial ceremony, to commemorate the victims and also enhance Shoah Truth's goals. So engage with the local Polish community, achieve international partnerships, start building more relationships, and meeting with government representatives there. And so we already have scheduled, while we are in Poland for the ceremony, to be meeting with the chief rabbi of Poland, the American Jewish Committee, the Israeli ambassador to Poland, the Polish Speaker of the House, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Affairs, and members of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And the feedback we've received from these organizations and these governmental officials who we have informed that we will be visiting has just been a great reception. And it feels incredibly meaningful to be able to make this impact and be there in Yad for the anniversary and have it be a first step to international relationships and partnerships with other organizations so that we can help other families do the same.
And this is a good example of where the past is something that has implications on the present. The story of Yavabne is challenging, not just for the past of Poland or for the Jewish community, but it is also for the present. And in the planning for this event, what has been inspiring is to work with so many people in Poland who are truly excited about the opportunity to stand in solidarity, to commemorate the victims, to commemorate what happened, and to think, all right, where do we go from here? We had something that happened here that was horrible. And what can we do to build a better future? And I think for me, in a lot of this work, sometimes the question we'll get is, how do you have a smile when you're dealing so much with such dark topics like Holocaust denial and distortion, especially in the form of online and in Yavabne, there have been kind of really challenging events that we have faced for so many years. And I think it is those people. It is connecting with the AJC Central European office that's engaging in meaningful work, that's going above and beyond. It's meeting people like Camille, who's a local activist from Yavabne, who is not Jewish, who goes out of his own volition to cut the grass in the Jewish cemetery of Yavabne, who, when we go, walks around with me when I went last summer and showing me the sites where my grandfather hid. Amid darkness, there is light, and it is our role to amplify that light and to make it larger. And I think for all of you who are attorneys on this call, that is what, me as a future attorney, but to you all too, I encourage you to find ways to bring that light and to magnify that light. And one of the ways we're doing it is through Shiro Truths. And I encourage you all to think about how could you respond to darkness by bringing in light as attorneys. And with that, I thank you for your time, for your attention, for making the space to permit us to share this story. To you, Alyssa, for coordinating all of this. I know it's challenging work. So may the conversation continue. May we be in dialogue, and may we take steps together to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot as we get this organization up and running. So thank you.
Thank you. So would you guys like to respond to some of the questions that have been sent to you?
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to. I will, these are great questions. And this first one from the anonymous attendee, it is actually one that I've been doing a lot of research on with, I know one of my professors is on this call right now, and we've been looking closely at the way in the United States that free speech rights are conceptualized is very different when you go into international spaces. If you look at the laws in Europe on the balance between the right to privacy or reputational rights balanced against the freedom of expression. So in Europe, for example, it could be the balance between Article 8 and Article 10. There is a wealth of jurisprudence. And some of the most interesting jurisprudence is actually looking at the Holocaust denial and distortion cases that the European Commission of Human Rights, European Court of Human Rights has addressed, and seeing the evolution of that case law. In other parts of the world, there is a balancing that takes place that considers both the importance of freedom of expression and weighs it against other considerations like reputational rights, like the dignity of human beings, like other considerations like the safety of society. And finding those balances, you will see between different countries, there will be a different balancing that will take place. For example, at the European level, what will happen is there's this idea called the margin of appreciation, right? And in these balancing acts sometimes, on things like Holocaust denial and distortion, there will typically be a wide margin of appreciation granted to states to address issues like Holocaust denial and distortion. And HDD issues are recognized as something that has a particular historical salience for countries in Europe. And that's why you will have that wide margin of appreciation permitting states to put regulations on that conduct. In Latin America, you'll see the same thing, where there is speech, right? That example of the Brazilian law, where there is the manufacturing of Nazi items, again, with this intent requirement of promoting Nazism. So that is something as attorneys to think about too, how our system and how our jurisprudence on the First Amendment pans out. It is different when you start looking at other jurisdictions, and it is really interesting as U.S. attorneys for you all to think about how are attorneys in other countries balancing these different rights, because it is different and depends on the country. I don't know, Jonah, if you have other things to add on that first question.
Covered it pretty well.
And John, I would like to address your question, and um, this actually the response is there is a very throughout history for the Jewish people there has been something called coded anti-Semitism, implicit anti-Semitism, and this is an example in Yavavne. When the pogrom was taking place, they forced Jewish people to carry around a statue of Lenin around the park in Yavavne before killing them, before murdering them, beating them to death. And this idea of saying that the Jews were communist in a lot of Europe and in Poland is a coded form of anti-Semitism. It's not to say that there weren't communist people who were Jewish. That is, of course, true, but it is based on the context of how it is being used. And when it's put on those plaques to say, for example, that many of the Soviet officers were Jews, it is used to push this narrative that the Jews are communists, that the Jews are communists who killed the Poles, and that is pushing forth those anti-Semitic narratives. So sometimes it's about kind of looking at the context behind what is being said. The context is so important when addressing these types of cases, and especially when you think the context of that particular boulder right next to the Yavavne site and right next to within the historical context of people who have denied and distorted what happened in Yavavne typically rely on this narrative that the Jews are communists who kill Poles, and that is a historical trope against the Jewish people. So I appreciate that question.
It's the timing, the location, the context, that it was a categorical assertion that general, all Jews were communists, and the intent behind it the intent is really to shift responsibility away from the Poles to the Germans to the Jews to blame them for their own deaths. It's the context.
And Professor Helfer, I thank you for this comment, and you are 100% right. The wheels of law are slow, and prosecutorial efforts could also be slow. In this case, they have been, right? The investigation was extended actually to surpass the 85th ceremony, which in many respects could say, like, why was there this extension? It might be that the prosecutor's office didn't want to address this before the 85th memorial that's coming up on July 10th. And that is why we have been considering other types of remedies that exist, other avenues. We have contemplated civil actions, but we have also explored a lot of remarkable diplomatic routes. This is one of the most remarkable things in the work we've been doing. The opportunity to engage with people in government in Poland and at the regional level who are interested in having this discussion, who recognize the problem of distorting the past in Yavavne and recognizing its implications for the present. There are a lot of government officials who want to engage in those conversations, who are working on it. So when we're doing this type of work, a lot of it happens behind the scenes. And that is something for attorneys to think about, right? How much of it is public work that happens and how much of it are conversations where it is little by little, it is taking those diplomatic steps to create that change. And I think that is also part, when we talk about our legal advocacy work, it is holistic. We have to think about different ways to do it. We have to contemplate what are the remedies available in civil court, what are our prospects in criminal court, and what is our objective? Do we want to gain the status of victims as the second and third generation of descendants of a Yavamna survivor and have a historical record saying we, the Waserstein family, have filed a notice saying that there is an injustice that has taken place? Is that sufficient for victory? Or then, once we have that victory, what is next? And I think those are questions that we have a lot of great attorneys who guide us. And so it's a fantastic question, Professor. I don't know what else you have on that, Jonah.
We have a question about have you been in touch with Jan Gross? You're perfectly suited for that one.
Yeah, I connected first with Jan Gross. I went to Princeton for undergrad, and right when I started, Professor Gross went emeritus status. So I had connected with him via email. And then when I was in Poland, I reached out to him. He's been living in Germany, and we actually connected in Germany, and I was able to speak with him about his work. When he wrote Neighbors, his story, it's an incredible story. He came across my grandfather's testimony in an archive, and he immediately reading the short testimony from my grandfather said, there is a story to be told here. And that was what led to the writing of Neighbors. And if you have a copy, and I encourage people to read it, you will see Samuel Wasserstein's testimony throughout the book. And so, yes, I have been in touch, and those have been very powerful conversations.
I believe you may have missed the question from Patricia.
So for us so far, there hasn't been, like, speaking kind of to the first case that we're working on with the Waserstein family, there haven't been efforts kind of on private collection of items. We have connected with attorneys who have worked on art restitution cases, and there is a lot of work that still is ongoing on that. And there have been changes in various European countries actually putting limits on the time frame, kind of a statute of limitations in position on when these claims could end. But that hasn't been too much of our work yet. But there are really interesting people working in the art restitution space, Patricia. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me and I'll be able to connect you. There's also people working through UNESCO on cultural heritage sites, and that's another part where it comes in, this idea of how to deal with private collection of items and things of that nature.
Land reclamation, art reclamation. These are all aspects we've been asked about that we refer to other attorneys, but we are really focused right now on acts of Holocaust denial in that sense.
Ayers, I think you have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
yes, Aaron's.
Actually, it's not a question. I would like to introduce myself, and I would like to ask how can I help you. My name is AAJLJ, and I'm an international trained lawyer from Turkey, Istanbul. I used to work for Nimrit Canada for some time, and I think what we are stuck in is not just Shoah. Like Shoah is important and very important educational system, and there are many institutions. But I think we are also stuck in the Middle Eastern experience of Jewish people that we should also add to Holocaust education and so on. Because when we are just like focus on Holocaust, please don't misunderstand me. Like Holocaust is very important, and as an education it should continue. But when we are just focusing on Holocaust, people don't consider like different problems and different part of being Jewish. So I think we should like enlarge our focus and adding these subjects to our Holocaust education, like some parts of this education system, and also in different countries, we should focus on different type of explanation of Holocaust. I think the main problem which I can detect from the experience that I can gather, because I was born and raised in Turkey as a Jewish person, and Like I became lawyer and now I'm in Canada, and like different parts of the world requires different type of explanation, I believe. I would like to listen to you. What's your stance on that opinion?
Ares, this is actually a couple months ago. I really started to think about this question. I've always thought about it, and a couple months ago, I've been working on a paper that has been really meaningful to me. And what I started to realize was when you look into specifically jurisprudence on Holocaust denial and distortion, it is so much of a guide for how we as me as a future lawyer, as lawyers, and as court systems will be able to grapple with genocide denial or mass atrocity denial. This is really the guidepost. When you look at jurisprudence from things like the European Court of Human Rights, and then you say, all right, what are the factors being used here? How do we make sense when something for you to look into areas? There's a cybercrime convention at the European, the Council of Europe level that
Mm.
gauges on kind of the digital era of mass atrocity denial and genocide denial. How do you actually make sense of a treaty like that in its optional protocol? Um, it's an additional protocol. You have to understand the past. You have to look at not only the Holocaust as history, but then how courts and how lawyers have addressed Holocaust denial and distortion, because that's going to prepare lawyers to more effectively be able to learn from those lessons and apply them to other instances. Because you're right. I think this should be a guidepost. It should be an inspiration. It should be lessons learned. It should be for analogical reasoning as well, something that you could point to when looking at other instances of mass atrocities. So I agree with you, and I share with you the vision of engaging with more organizations with this. I've spoken with other organizations that deal with other denials of genocides, and there's a lot of interest in doing collaboration. I think Shoah Truths, sometimes when you specialize, you're able to actually get depth and you're able to then partner effectively and branch out. And I think that's the approach we're taking as an organization. But I'm 100% with you that these lessons have to be applied beyond the Holocaust, because that is how we learn from those lessons of the past. And again, as my professor in college would share, history may not repeat, but it certainly does rhyme. And that's why we need to learn from those lessons. So thank you, Ares. And Hinda, to your point, I know you've been involved with the March of the Living for a long time. And absolutely, I think that the March of the Living had such a profound impact on making us realize how important it is to continue to learn from the past, to engage and be present, especially in an era where the generation of survivors will soon no longer be with us. It is our responsibility. It is the people on this call. We are the custodians of that past. We have heard the stories from survivors. We have learned from their lessons. And I think that is just one of the many programs that create those opportunities to engage with that kind of learning. So thank you, Hinda. And thank you for the work you've done for so many years on that. I know you're an incredible advocate.
Thank you so much, Jonah and Abe, for an
May I
outstanding. Oh,
some little thing? I I also believe that this education system is important to provide as much as we can do once we are ally with some people in their allyship period, because we know that unfortunately history taught us that once, like this decade, we are ally with some people. Like now, Iranian people are giving their ear to us to listen what we are talking about, or Hindu people. This should be a time of providing our education and providing our experience to them as much as we can. We, I believe that these periods we should see as the opportunity and as the time that we can provide them as much as we can about our experience.
There's the moment is now to be doing this work. It is in our hands and it is our responsibility. And I will answer Helen's question as well.
Okay, sorry
The
for
the
I
poll.
didn't mean to cut. Just
No, no, no.
I
Thank you,
try
Ares. No,
to provide
thank you.
another vision, another perspective about this because we missed this train in Turkey. I don't want that we miss train with other people and so on.
Of course. Thank you, Ares. And Helen, to your point, in my view, and in the view of our work, the Polish people are the most important partners in this work that we're doing. It is thanks to people in Poland right now who are creating these connections, both in government and but also local people. It is people at the Forum for Dialogue who are just ordinary people who have daytime jobs who are saying it is important to preserve history, and they recognize that those are our most important partners. And there's so many people throughout Europe who understand that, who understand the importance of history. And this is a wide coalition. I think sometimes you will hear voices saying that it is everyone against one person, but no, there is so much collaboration, there's so much partnership and community taking place. And I will always be willing to connect with people who want to engage in this. And to that story like Camille, who showed me around, and to others who came with me to Yavabne, to others who I'm going to meet now when I go to Poland. These are the partnerships that matter. How do we actually learn from our history is engaging with people and the stakeholders in the communities where things happened. And it's talking with them, it's having those conversations in places like Warsaw, in places like Yavabne. And that is incredibly important. This is incredibly, like, the law is all about people and addressing Holocaust denial and distortion. It is about engaging with people and sharing our story. To the people who are receptive, we will share it. And to those who are not, we will bring light amid darkness. And that is how we as an organization will strategize to address these issues.
Thank
Alyssa, I
you.
will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you to everyone around the world who's joining us. We're very grateful to have people from all over different time zones. Thank you, Ares, for your insight. So beyond the importance, of course, of preserving the truth of the Holocaust, I think your work offers such an important lesson for lawyers. We often think of the law as limited by traditional approaches or, causes of action that we are more familiar with. But obviously, your work reminds us that lawyers can be creative, strategic, and that you can be innovative in using the existing frameworks to protect our communities, the Jewish community, of course, and defend the truth. So thank you for reminding us all of how much work can be done within the law and how we can think outside the box still. And
Absolutely. Thanks so
yes,
much. And thank you all for being here.
thank
Abe is based in South Florida. I'm based in New York. If anyone would like to continue the conversation, we'd love to meet up with you, talk about the organization, work we're doing. Um, we
yes,
had our email addresses in the slide. Mine is jonah@shoahtruths.com. Abe's is abe@shoahtruths.com. Please reach out. Don't hesitate.
yes, thank you. And also just for everyone to know, we on July 8th, we have a lunch and learn in person in DC and virtually. That is on with Richard Heidemann and Joseph Tippograph, good friends of the AAJLJ, and it's on UNRWA impunity without accountability. So we'll be sending out more information on that. So we hope to see you guys there. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Jonah and Abe, for your incredible work. And
Yeah,
this,
thank you for hosting us.
all right.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
we'll have a recording for people to view as well. So we'll circulate that.
Great.
All
Enjoy the
right.
rest of your day, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.